The Hindu Kush Mountains in northeast Afghanistan have halted the expansion of empires from the Persian west, the Chinese east, the Indian south and the Soviet north. This twisted knot of mountains has thwarted the ambitions of kings, emperors and generals. Alexander the Great, Genghis Khan, the British and the Soviets forced their armies through these high peaks to victory and disaster. These mountains have shaped the people and history of Afghanistan, and each peak is a tombstone in the graveyard of empires. But there is a passage, the Wakhang corridor, carved by the river Oxus, named by the ancient Greeks before the days of Alexander. The Silk Route followed this fabled path, trodden by Marco Polo, Buddhist missionaries, Sufi holy men and Chinese ambassadors. On the very roof of the world, these spies, envoys, explorers and armies played their great games and met their fates. Most have passed with no record, no mark, no trace remaining, but here and there you can find a sign that points to a history long past.
لازار ملکی واخان سلام ای هوای تازه روی بدخشان سلام ای وطن لازار ملکی واخان سلام.
This is Sahadi Brogel, now just a hamlet, but previously a thriving town on the Silk Route, deep in the Hindu Kush. Here in 747 AD, the Chinese general Gao fought his Tibetan rivals to retake control of this vital trade link. By making a secret crossing of the river Oxus, Gao was able to outflank his enemies and chase them over the Brogel Pass into modern-day Pakistan, thus securing a decisive victory. 2 days' march west of Sahad lies Kala-i-Panja, the former royal capital of the Wakhan kingdom. A ruined fort stands guard over the river Oxus as the only remaining testament to the strategic importance of this once thriving branch of the Silk Route. Wars, foreign treaties, new borders and the growth in sea trade diminished the importance of this trade route until finally all three borders closed and the Wakhang corridor became a cul-de-sac. The Wakhi people who had made a living from the merchants travelling the Silk Route had to adapt to a life of subsistence farming. Living in small scattered villages on the floodplains of the river Oxus, the Wakhi maintain an austere yet honest existence. Wheat is the staple crop, which is grown mixed with peas. The crops are grown together because the peas add nitrates to the soil as they grow. This is vital for the survival of the Wakhi because the soil is poor and animal dung, which might otherwise be used for fertiliser, is burnt for fuel due to the absence of trees. With short summers and long winters, the Wakhi have to work hard using traditional farming methods to harvest enough food for the whole year. Harvest time is in September and the men have to work fast to bring in the crop before the onset of the winter snows. Teams of donkeys are used for threshing. It's an ancient and effective technique. This is a sight that may have been observed by travellers on the Silk Route for hundreds or perhaps thousands of years. As the day and the summer draws to a close, the harvest is finally in. The peas have been dried on tarpaulin in the sun, and are now being packed into sacks for transport back home. Loads in the Wakhan are nearly all moved by muscle power, either human or a variety of pack animals. There is only one road in the Wakhan, and that is only passable by four-wheel drive vehicles, but they are a rarity used by the occasional NGO or mountaineering expedition that ventures into the area. For the rest of the time, the roads and the loads are pretty much the same as they were in the days of Marco Polo. The Wahi keep a variety of domestic animals, as well as growing crops. Livestock is a measure of wealth and a form of currency in the Wakhan. Prices for goods and services will often be given in head of sheep, as bartering livestock is the only way for the Wahi to acquire goods they cannot produce themselves. Often the Wahi will sell their flocks and herds to traders from other parts of northern Afghanistan, who come to the Wakhan specifically to buy livestock. Occasionally they will follow an ancient tradition and drive the flocks over the mountain passes and through rivers all the way to Kabul, where they will receive the best prices. It is often the children who will tend the livestock in the villages, especially in the summer months when the schools are closed. More and more Wahi children are getting the opportunity to learn, as both the government and NGOs have been opening schools in the area. There's a great appetite for knowledge, and both children and teachers will walk many miles to get to and from school each day. Wahi houses are single-storey mud and stone dwellings set in scattered villages amongst their crops and pastures, with only footpaths linking each house to its neighbours. Home for the Wahi is a community affair, with extended families living together in a single large room known as a Pamiri house. Against each wall there are raised platforms which are used for cooking, sitting, eating and sleeping. During the day the women will usually congregate on the raised platform near the oven. The men will usually sit together to one side. Cooking is done using a traditional stone and mud oven and a range with animal dung used as fuel when wood is not available. A traditional meal might consist of mutton and potatoes with bread, all of which is locally produced. The Wahi also eat rice and drink tea, which they get by bartering livestock with traders. The smoke from the cooking fire escapes through a hole in the centre of the roof, which is also the only source of light. The geography of the Wakhan has kept the people relatively isolated from the outside world. The Wahi have their own language, which is an Indo-European tongue of the Pamiri group of languages. Few Wahi adults read, and there has been very little written in the Wahi language. Therefore, music, poetry and storytelling are important cultural traditions that the Wahi use to pass their history, geography and legends from one generation to the next.
خشاوم بناوشایی کویی را یا لالای سرخی و گلی سوری را جان با هم کی بدیم جنگ و جدل نکردیم ای عالی بیکشیم از آبی را دوری را
The Wahi storytellers recite a number of folk tales and legends, many of which incorporate pre-Islamic myths. The characters include dragons, witches and Dio Sama, a type of yeti or cold giant that will carry off children who don't heed their mother's advice. There are heroes and villains, betrayals and revenge. There is even the legend of Alexander the Great, known by Afghans as Iskander, falling in love with the angel of Lake Shiva. Although there is no historical record of Alexander ever coming to the Wakhan, the story has his body being returned to Lake Shiwa in Wakhan after his death in Egypt, so that he could be eternally reunited with his supernatural true love. During the winter, the Wahi will rarely venture far from their homes, with villages cut off from one another by snow. But in the short summer, the Wahi will migrate en masse to the high pastures to fatten their flocks and herds. These are the high pastures of the Wakhan Big Pamir. It is autumn, and the grass has faded from green to brown. The Wahi women milk the goats and yaks to make cheese and butter. The women also collect yak down, which they use to make felt. This is used to make carpets and the covering for yurts, which the Wahi have learned to make from their nomadic Kyrgyz neighbours. Life is particularly tough for the Wahi women, as the area suffers the highest recorded maternal mortality rate in the world. Infant mortality is also dreadfully high, with 1 in 3 children dying before the age of 5. The Wahi still have their herds in the summer pastures, but soon the winter will be upon them, and it will be time for the kutch, or migration back down to the villages, leaving the Pamir to their nomadic Kyrgyz neighbours. The Afghan Kyrgyz are nomadic herdsmen who used to migrate for hundreds of kilometres across Central Asia. The Pamir was a favoured summer pasture. One by one, the Chinese, Russian and finally Pakistani borders closed until eventually they were trapped in the Pamir of the Afghan-Wakhan corridor. For the Kyrgyz, it's an austere existence, without roads, schools or any medical facilities. The Kyrgyz live year-round in yurts made of yak felt, stretched over wooden frames. The yurts have metal chimneys, which are attached to iron stoves, which are used for cooking and providing heat in the long, harsh winter months. As there are no trees in the Pamir, the only fuel the Kyrgyz have is animal dung. There are no medical facilities in the Pamirs, so life expectancy is even worse than for the Wahi women and children. However, no one really knows the full extent of the problem, as so few medical professionals have ever visited the Kyrgyz to find out. One sign that this remote and isolated corner of the world used to be a vital trade route is the Bactrian camel. Natives of the Central Asian deserts, the Bactrian camel was first domesticated in northern Iran or northeast Afghanistan some 4,000 years ago. Now these beasts are livestock, but their ancestors carried spices, silk and tea across the Hindu Kush from China to the west. It is the end of the short summer, so the Kyrgyz prepare to move from their summer to winter pastures. In the past, this might have meant travelling for hundreds of kilometres, but now the winter migration takes less than a day. The Kyrgyz are well practised at dismantling and re-erecting their yurts. Working together, they will dismantle and pack the entire settlement in a matter of hours. It is quite a complex task to take apart the many components of a yurt and to pack and transport it in a way that it can be reassembled quickly. Everything that the Kyrgyz owns is packed onto animals. Within a matter of hours, all the yurts are down and the settlement is packed. The winters are long and harsh, with temperatures dropping below minus 35 degrees Celsius. This is September, and already the snows have begun. With no agriculture, the Kyrgyz are entirely dependent on trading livestock for all the food they cannot produce. The yaks are very much accustomed to the conditions, and actually do not survive well in lower and warmer places. However, for the Kyrgyz themselves, life in the Pamir must rank as one of the hardest and most remote existences in the world. The mountains that have kept the Wakhan safe from invasion and the Silk Route that brought trade are beginning to attract a new economic opportunity. After almost 30 years of absence, trekkers and mountaineers are beginning to return to the Wakhan corridor. The Wahi people living in Tajikistan, and particularly Pakistan, have benefited greatly from the development of the tourism industries just across the borders. It is now hoped that well-managed and respectful tourism can bring a new hope to the people of the Wakhan and help safeguard their culture and heritage.
Come down.